Thanks for joining us here on the Breakdown.net. My name's Costa Zouliou, and we're lucky enough today to be having a chat with William Crighton. William's third album, Water and Dust, won an ARIA Award for Best Blues and Roots Album in 2022. And this year, 2026, March 20 as a matter of fact, sees the release of the follow-up to Water and Dust, and it's titled Colonial Drift. And once the record comes out, William will take Colonial Drift out on the road for a national tour of Australia and a couple of dates in New Zealand as well. William Crighton, thanks for joining us on the Breakdown.net.
Thanks for having me, Costa. Good to be here.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. How does it feel to have album number 4 in the can?
It feels good. Like I said, it was off air. It was a few years in the making, but very happy to have it almost out and very happy to have it completed, that's for sure.
The first single, Further Down the Road, is a song of longing, but I'm not sure of what it's longing for. Is it longing for country? Is it longing for love? Is it longing for something else, or neither?
Pretty much all of the above, you know. It's I wrote that song with my wife, Julianne. It's that idea of never feeling alone, but feeling alone. I like people to interpret the tunes how they want to interpret them when it's not just a straight narrative, you know. So that idea of just being alone out there and thinking all sorts of things, you know, and things can come upon you. And some of that is great, and some of it's you're embroiled in the mistakes you've made.
And when you go out and you're thinking about those things, is that when you're kind of out in the bush, on country?
Most of the time, yeah. I mean, what I think is that, you know, you're always on country. You know, it's like whether you're in the city or in my house here, it's a different, you know, everything we look around, it's all made of country, and it's all it. So, and we're a part of that, you know. I'm lucky though. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but I live across the road from quite an expanse of bush. I have an expanse of bush behind me and a train line not that far that way. So if you hear the train, that's why. But I love going through the bush, jogging through the bush, and just being in there, being alone. You know, I also love taking the kids in there, and I just feel at peace in there. That's sort of how. That's why I love it.
Sex, Death and Choices was a B-side to Further Down the Road. To my ears anyway, it's one of the real standout tracks on the record. Tell us about that one.
Well, that one I'd had around for a few years, and I had pages and pages of lyrics in the same way I did for a song called Kalara on Water and Dust, but very different songs. But that same idea where I just wrote too much, you know, but I had to write that much to then see exactly what I was trying to say. And then I got it from, 10 pages down to 5 or so, and then took it to my wife Julianne, and we edited out a bunch more, and she added a couple of lines in that song. But it was just that feeling again of being human in this time now, where again you're thinking of maybe regrets you have, but you're thinking of love that you have, you're thinking of the world around you, what's happening. You know, it's an interesting place, and then thinking about where you fit in it all, you know, and how that is, you know, those big questions, but are answered every day when you go to the fridge and have a coffee or whatever. You know, you can see big and little and that sort of thing. You know, I don't know if that makes much sense, but that song to me didn't really make much sense till I wrote it. I didn't sit down and sort of, some songs I sit down and I have a bit of an arc of what I want to say or what I want to do. That sort of just poured out of me. So the more I listen to it back, like when I sing it, I think, oh shit, right, I'm calling myself out there, aren't I? You know, you can kind of, it sneaks up on you.
That's interesting. I mean, is it something that you kind of haven't experienced that much before, that the way it just pours out of you?
For this album, lyrically, that's one of the only songs I've got where that's happened, where that has been just a big bull to wrestle. But it a lot of it out there, and you know you feel connected to it, but you don't actually. It's hard to articulate exactly the reason why. There was another song on this album called Peaceful Land, and that's a different sort of a feel, but that song that just came upon me, and I just played it, and the very first time I played it is exactly the same as what you hear, bar Julianne and Jeff Lang and I went through, and a couple of the lyrics that you couldn't make out when I was just stream of consciousness, we made lyrics of what we heard there, but that was a very interesting experience, because I was just tuning my guitar and then all of a sudden a song come about, and it's only ever happened a couple of times. That's the first time it's ever happened in its exact entirety, and so I was very happy with that, and I had no idea how it happened. It felt like a bit of a prayer or something.
Your wife, Julianne's got a big role in your music and your life, obviously.
Yeah, well, we've been together. We got together when Jules was 18 and I was 22, and we've been together since. We've got 3 kids, and we do, we've always written together, bounce things off each other. But this album, she definitely had a bigger role in, as far as writing quite a lot of the lyrics with me on this, and quite a lot of the lyrics just on her own. So that was great, and we just hadn't had an opportunity to do that. You would think that we would have been married for so long, but this album we actually no, we're going to just really focus on doing this one together. So that's and I was doing a bit more production of it, and so she would be writing, and it was a nice little flow we had. We were working as one brain there for a while.
So how long did it take you to put the whole thing together?
Well, it pretty much started as soon as we released Water and Dust. I always have it, I'm always thinking of the next thing as soon as the thing's done, and that's not something I would love in my head to take a little bit of time away from that, but I seem to click over into things, and even though it takes I'm not like put out a record every year or every 6 months or something. Maybe one day I'll be like that, but it takes a bit of time for me. But the idea and the concepts and the demoing happen almost immediately after I put something else out, And so it started in the caravan when we were living out at Bellbird. I just had a little setup in there with a computer and a couple of synths and a guitar. And I used to do a lot of running. A lot of ideas would come to me then, and I'd go straight back from running into the caravan and try and put some of those ideas down, And that was sort of how it worked. And then we just had bandmates and friends come by, and we started building tracks. And then it evolved into actually putting down some live band takes of those tracks that we've evolved the arrangements for.
You mentioned before Jeff Lang in there helping you to write some music. It's quite a list of Australian musicians, luminaries, people like Luke Davison, the drummer from The Preachers, the late Rob Hurst, still very hard to say that. His bandmate Jim Magini, I mentioned there Jeff Lang, Yidaki Didge player William Barton, who in my opinion is a national treasure. They've all collaborated on the record, so how did you get such a broad cast of musos and everyone playing together? Over
the years, you just meet friends, and those guys you meet who you mentioned, I consider mates, and I love playing music with mates, and of course some of them are heroes of mine too, like Rob and Jim, and so I got to meet, I knew Rob for quite a few years, but I didn't really meet Jim too well until recording a Water and Dust, where we did half of it at Oceanic, and so that, yeah. And then we went out on the road with them for their tour, and I got a bit closer to Jim. And we haven't done any writing together, Jim and I, but he's certainly played a lot of guitar on some of these songs and a bit of organ and helped with ideas. Rob had a big hand in 2 of the songs we wrote together, and then of course he sang on it. Yeah, like you say, very hard to admit that he's gone, But the lessons you learn from him and the interactions I had with him and will stay with me as they will with anybody he met forever, He was just one of those special, people. And William Barton's a dear friend of mine, so, we've been on a few adventures together. He's a busy guy, but when we do hang out, it's great. And we always, play a little bit of music and talk about that sort of stuff. So his playing is incredible, what he can do. Not only Yidaki, but he's singing and he's writing, and he just guitar playing, so you can feel things, he just feels things. And Langy's a genuine legend too, I always wanted Jeff Lang in my band, and then so one day I got the courage up to ask him, and he said yes, so he's been playing with me for a few years now. And Luke Davison the same, I met Luke when I was opening for Missy Higgins quite a few years ago, and they did a show with the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra, Missy did, and I just remember we'd done a few shows up until then, and I knew the band was good, and I was kind of in and out of different places, but that particular show, Luke Davison he kind of led the whole thing, and it was he turned it from something like a pop show with an orchestra into something almost Pink Floyd-esque. You know, just literally from what he was doing on the drums and how he was sinking in with that stuff. And then we just developed a really strong friendship. And so we recorded a lot of this, Luke Davison and I and my other mate, Chris Dale, here at home together, the three of us. You know, that's, I love everyone who played on the album, you know. It's very lucky to have those people in my life.
We're talking to William Crighton about his fourth record, Colonial Drift. You mentioned all those people. Who's heading out on the road with you?
On the road, it'll be Luke Davison on the drums and some other things. It'll be my wife, Julianne, Adam Ventura on the bass, Jeff Lang. On a couple of shows, we'll have CJ Stranger too. So, yeah, decent band. One of my favourite bands I've ever had, you know. It feels really good. We played up at Woodford on New Year's Eve, and it was a really bloody good time. So, it's playing live is where it's at for me, Costa. Like, I love recording things and whatever, but I love that idea of the songs taking on a new life every time you play them. And those musicians really allow that to happen and encourage that to happen and add their own things, you know, every night. And I think because they were a part of the production of it and played on it and remember when all the things happened, where they have that emotional or spiritual investment in those songs, so they feel free to do that as well, which is cool.
What were the songs that Rob Hurst played on or wrote with you?
We wrote a bunch of songs. Some of them will probably appear on the next album too, but the two that are on this album are Horizon and Warzone. And so we first worked together on Water and Dust, and we did a couple of other things in between that too, a thing with Liz and then something for Rob and Jim's project. But he said, he called me up after we got off the road on the oils going around Europe, and he said, I got a couple of starts to songs that I have for you and Jules. Do you want to come down and work through them? So we did, and I love writing with Rob. I learned so much off him, and Jules and I learned so much off him, and it was just a good dynamic. He can see who he's writing for, but he also doesn't lose what he thinks makes a good song. And it was incredible to be able to have shared that with him, especially in the twilight of his life.
Such a generous offer too, isn't it? Yeah, here's a couple of songs.
Yeah, well, I mean, he had ideas for them, because he was always passionate about things, and he wasn't the sort of fellow who just would write a disingenuous sort of tale or something. He'd research it, he'd be fired up about it, and we'd sit there, and the passion, like in his eyes and in our eyes for what we were writing, And so with Warzone, Rob and I sort of got that chorus going. We conceptualised some of the ideas for the verses, and then Jules took it away, and she pretty much wrote the first two verses on her own. And Rob and I both looked at each other and said, well, we couldn't have done any better than that. We could be lucky to, it was brilliant. So that was really fortunate to spend that time with Rob, And he's there in every writing session now pretty much. When I'm writing a song, I always feel like, I think to myself, what would Hursty do, or what would he say,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a great man, and that man, gave me a social conscience over the years. The one band that I saw the most times of any, and I was lucky enough to catch up with Jim and talk to him about the family dog and the tour and all that sort of stuff. So
I actually listened to that. That was a cool interview.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah. And again, for me, it was like talking to one of your heroes. We're talking to William Crighton about his fourth record, Colonial Drift. You're on thebreakdown.net. My name's Costa Zouliou. You snuck a bit of a Red Gum cover in there as well.
Well, we've been doing that song live for a while, and it's always a good one to play live, and it sheds a good picture to say that some of the things in what we're living through now didn't come from nowhere either. This sort of war isn't over yet. And it's never over. It just changes shape and form. And so that song for me was a good picture and set a good tone in the storyline of the album, as well as being just a fun one to play. But I actually and Shuey's a mate of mine too. My wife and I run a program in the local jail, a music program we've been doing for a few years, and I asked John to come up and do a day with that. So since then, our friendship has grown, and we yarn a bit about different things. But I always thought that he wrote that song, and but it was actually Trevor Lucas who put that song together, and then Shuey added lines and made it what it is for Red Gum. But I had attributed it to him, and he said, yeah. I must tell you, he said, I didn't actually write that song. I said, well, what's actually? To me, you did, mate.
Tell us about the program you do with the jails.
Well, we've been doing it for about 8 years, and it started as just going in and teaching some inmates guitar. And I found that gave them a bit of confidence and whatnot. And so that grew. That's now grown to a place where we have a bunch of different instruments in there. We have a band. We do some recordings. I have some guest artists come through who are on tour and come through. The greater picture is that the jail that I work in, even though it's maximum security, is very focused on bringing the idea of investment in one's community into it. They have gardens, they have art programs and pottery programs and things that give the inmates a bit of self-worth, and because that's what a lot of them, they're in there because they lack self-confidence and they got mixed up in the wrong thing. I could always identify by thinking to myself, well, geez, the way I grew up, I'm only a couple of bad choices away from being in there, Obviously, that's not for everyone. You have some, bad eggs, that's for sure. But at the same time, the vision of this jail of realising that, if you can give somebody the confidence to play some guitar or to learn an instrument or to do a piece of art, that self-belief can then help them, get a job when they get out, have a skill, have a bit more, because eventually a lot of people don't understand. Well, they understand, but it doesn't hit home that most of the fellas in jail are getting out. So if you want to make them better and more equipped to deal with communities and to be a part of the community when they come out, rather than making them worse. So I see it from that point of view. There are people, I've copped a bit of flack over it, and people, they don't deserve music, they don't deserve that, it's why you're doing that. And that's what my answer to that is that, well, they're going to be out. Do you want them to be better people, self-reflect a bit in music and come out, hopefully, a bit better than they went in? Because that's why we do it.
Mate, you mentioned a storyline through the record of Colonial Drift. Tell us about that. Tell us how that storyline goes.
Well, I don't want to... I'd really like people to have a listen to it and feel that storyline and take what they want from it, because it's going to take a few listens for that to absorb. For me, it wasn't just thrown at all out there in a linear way. We're being a bit vulnerable about talking about some of the things that are happening in our lives, but we're also having a little bit of a punt on the future. There is a way in which it's a circular nature to the album, because you can identify a pattern in people, both on a personal level and on a meta level. You can see that we go in cycles, we grow and we dissolve, and we grow into different things and we dissolve, and so I was thinking about that. I'm 40 now, turned 40, and so a lot of the things I've let go, the thoughts I used to have and the feelings I used to have, but new observations have come in, and you keep adjusting the stories of your own perception, the way you look at the world as you get older. And I guess it's just that. It's that Australian, for me, my Australian journey in that sense, and what I've observed. We have a lot of, it's a rich story-filled place here, and some of those stories are challenging and dark and hurtful, and some of them are brilliant and beautiful and powerful. And so how that then affects the individual, in this case me, is how I wove that album together. There's a bit of spirituality in there, well, connection I would call it, but then there's also real concerns about American drones. I wanted it to feel like people could put on the headphones and just get lost for 40 minutes or however long it goes for, and be absorbed in that journey and have a mixture of feelings, because I've fucked up and I'm talking about it. I've observed things. I'm proud of things, that I'm talking about in there. And adding Julianne's flavour also makes it sort of, it takes it away from me a little bit into which was interesting, because then it could really be an experience rather than just, oh, this is me and that's her. It's like it kind of combines into this one thing, and especially when you add Rob's flavour in there and everything, it paints a pretty interesting tapestry, you know. I hope. Or it could be just a pile of shit, but I hope it's not.
It's not, mate. And thanks very much for joining us here. We're talking to William Crighton about his fourth record, Colonial Drift. Saturday, April 11, the tour kicks off at the Old Museum in Brisbane. Friday the 17th at Lion Arts Factory. Saturday the 18th, the Rechabite in Perth. Saturday, April 25, the Gumball, Lower Belford in New South Wales. Castlemaine in Victoria at Theatre Royal. That's May the 7th. May the 8th at the Howler in Brunswick in Victoria. The Anglesey at the Sound Doctor on May the 9th. Wednesday, May the 20th, San Fran in Wellington in New Zealand. Tuning Fork in Auckland in New Zealand on Thursday, May 21. Back into Australia, Wollongong at La La La's Friday, May 29, May 30. The Crowbar in Sydney on, that's Saturday, May 30, and Friday, June the 12th, Hamilton Station Hotel in Newcastle. William, thanks very much for joining us here on thebreakdown.net. Good luck with the record. I really dig it. I'm sure a lot of other people will as well. Hopefully I'll be able to get and catch you at the Old Museum, mate.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure, mate.